Before we begin, a viewer advisory is necessary. What follows is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is the word-forward federal courtroom testimony from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. As documented by Inner City Press, no one anticipated his arrival. The room held its breath, all eyes fixed on the next witness. When the rear doors swung open and in walked Will Smith, a ripple of shock passed through the gallery. Even the judge sat frozen. There was no announcement, no prepared statement, just Will walking in by choice. Until that day, he'd remained publicly silent. His name tangled in leaked court memos, headline fodder, and off-the-record recordings to graphic for public release. But something shifted. Maybe it was the circulating rumors. Maybe a sense of betrayal from former allies. Or maybe it was hearing that private tape behind closed doors. Whatever it was, Will had reached his limit. He didn't come to testify as a star. He came as a man burdened by silence. And once he spoke, no one was ready. Because what he said about Diddy, the parties, the mind games, the climate of fear wasn't just shocking. It was a red flag. That morning began like every other day in the trial. The room filled with whispers, reporters crouched in their usual spaces, attorneys murmuring strategy as they waited for the witness list to unfold. Then, from the side doors, Will Smith entered. No bodyguards, no lawyers, no press alert, just him. The silence was instant. Some thought it was an error. Others suspected a PR move. But the way he walked, deliberate, serious, the old fresh Prince charm replaced with something broken, told everyone this was no act. The judge looked stunned. Diddy, once relaxed and cocky at the defense table, suddenly stiffened. Will walked straight to the witness chair. He avoided every gaze. Not a glance at Diddy. "I wasn't invited to speak today," Will said, voice steady. "I asked for permission. The judge allowed it, and from that point forward, the entire dynamic of the trial changed." What Will Smith was about to share wasn't part of any tabloid headline or trending topic. It was something far deeper, something that had lived inside him for years. It all began at a party no one dared to mention. "I've held this in for too long," he began. "I've smiled for cameras. I've held trophies. I've played heroes on screen, but none of that erases what I witnessed, or who was responsible." He turned slightly toward Diddy. "It was you?" Will said it started like many Hollywood tales through an invitation. It came from a mutual acquaintance, someone he'd worked with before. They pitched it as a birthday bash for Diddy, just music, networking, a relaxed night for celebrities to unwind. Will had been to dozens of events like that, so he didn't think twice. But when he got there, something felt wrong. It was this enormous estate tucked in the hills. SUVs lined the gate, security everywhere. The second he entered, his phone was confiscated. That should have been the first warning. They claimed it was for privacy, he said. But it felt more like control, like they didn't want any evidence. Once inside, the vibe was eerie, dim lighting, odd ambient music that almost seemed to pulse through the air. There weren't any cameras, at least none visible, but there were mirrors everywhere, as if someone or something was always watching. After some small talk and a few drinks, Diddy approached him directly. He said, "You're family now," and gave me this look. Will recalled. It wasn't kindness, it was possession. Diddy led him into a private room. Will assumed for business talk, but what he walked into would haunt him. He saw people, men, women, engaged in disturbing acts. Some were celebrities he recognized. Some appeared too young. Others stood around watching like it was sport. And Diddy, he was laughing, as if it was all completely normal. Will's voice faltered. "I didn't know how to exit," he said. "And that's the trap. Once you're in, there's no out." A few days later, he got a call. "Blocked number." The voice on the line said, "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince." Click. He thought it was just a creepy joke until a package showed up at his office. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. "I almost didn't press play, but I did." It was footage from that same night, showing me slouched on a couch, visibly dazed. "I don't remember feeling that gone. But there, I was laughing at something I couldn't even recall." A voice came from behind the camera, Diddy's voice, saying, "That's how we keep him." Will told the court the fear that hit him in that moment was unlike anything he'd felt before. "I realized I wasn't a guest at that party, I was being initiated," he said. That's when the control tactics started. He began receiving more invitations to similar events. He declined. Then roles he was once up for disappeared. Longtime collaborators suddenly went quiet. Online rumors surfaced that he was gay, unstable, cheating. "I knew exactly what it was pressure," he said. Diddy never had to spell it out. The message was clear: stay quiet or lose everything. So Will said nothing for years. He kept the mask on through interviews, dodged speculation, buried himself in work. But every time I saw someone else speak up, Cassie, Don Richard. Even when Meek Mill's name got dragged into it, I asked myself, why am I still silent? He scanned the room. Diddy didn't just destroy careers, he built fear into the truth. And that, Will said, is what finally pushed him to come forward. He paused, looked the jury in the eye, and leaned in toward the mic. It wasn't just that video, he said. That was the leash from then on. Every move he made felt controlled. He described phone calls routed through his agent, offers, invites, opportunities, but if he declined Diddy's events, things would quietly fall apart. I turned one down, he said, and the next week, a project I was promised would suddenly go dark. It didn't just happen once, it became routine. Diddy didn't issue threats, he had people who made things happen. PR agents, bloggers, producers. He knew exactly who to call, how to ruin someone's moment, or snatch away a deal. Will shared one moment in 2013 when he was lined up for a major global campaign with a luxury brand. We were finalizing contracts. I'd already shot some promo content, he said. Then out of nowhere, I was dropped. No reason. 2 weeks later, he declined another Diddy event. Suddenly, the smear stories began. Gossip sites ran strangely specific rumors, details only an insider could know. It was psychological warfare, Will said. You start to doubt yourself, but then it repeats the sabotage, the silence. You realize it's not in your head, it's a cage. Will said he wasn't alone. Other stars were living the same nightmare. Some can't speak because of contracts, he explained. Some are just afraid they'll be targeted like I was. Then he turned toward Diddy and stated, without hesitation, you didn't just collect people. You controlled them. That was all Will said, but everyone in the courtroom understood exactly what he meant. And he wasn't finished. The manipulation wasn't limited to artists, Will explained. Diddy's influence ran deep into Hollywood itself. You couldn't land on a major stage without crossing paths with someone Diddy helped install. He said, Will recounted a 2016 charity gala where, behind the scenes, top players from music, film, politics, and tech were all treating Puff like a kingmaker. I saw an executive from a streaming company hand him a USB and whisper, only you get the final cut, Will recalled. He didn't reveal what was on the drive, but said it confirmed his worst suspicions. Diddy wasn't just mingling, he was controlling the gates. Will described how he started noticing certain stars, actors, rappers, influencers acting oddly submissive around Diddy. Forced laughter, awkward praise, deference in every conversation. That's when it hit me, Will said. They weren't friends, they were survivors. He admitted that part of the reason he stayed silent so long was fear that speaking up would erase his career. But over time, he realized it had already happened, just quietly. There was no blacklist, just silence, doubt, fewer calls, closed doors. The only thing that kept him afloat, he said, was the public, the fans, the people. That's what Diddy couldn't control. Will said he began to see it all with new eyes. He started revisiting old clips, red carpet photos, backstage moments, and in the background, sometimes visible, sometimes not, Diddy's presence was always there, either in person or through power. Then, Will said, came the moment that broke everything open. His voice dropped, slower and heavier now. I stayed silent for decades, he said. Told myself it was in my head, that it didn't happen or that it didn't happen to me. But then the audio started surfacing. He admitted he didn't believe it at first, until he got a phone call not from a lawyer or journalist but from someone he once trusted. They told me, Will, you're on one of those tapes. They played it in court. People are talking. That's when it hit him. I didn't even know a tape like that existed, he said. But once I accepted it might be true, everything else made sense. Will said he spent that entire night replaying old memories, the party, the strange blackout, the envelope, the calls. It was a system, he said, and I was caught in it. What finally pushed him over wasn't fear, it was shame. I realized if I stayed silent, that silence would define me, and I couldn't live with that. My kids will read these stories. My grandkids might. I had to speak. He said he called the prosecutors himself. I told them, I'm ready. Ask anything. I'll answer. Then he turned to the jury. I wasn't just pressured. I was tricked. I was recorded. I was exploited. He glanced at Diddy again, this time his voice harder. And you knew exactly what you were doing. Will shut his eyes for a second, almost like he was bracing himself. Then he went on. When the prosecution asked if he wanted to hear the tape, he hesitated. But I knew I had to. The court cleared the room, no media, no jury, just Will, the judge, and the lawyers. I heard myself, Will said softly, laughing. But it wasn't real, it was empty. I sounded drunk. No, drugged. He described the background, soft music, hushed voices, the occasional cheer. Then came Diddy's voice, clear as day, Will said. He said something like, "That's how we break them in." Then Will heard his own name being spoken. While things were happening he wouldn't even describe. It wasn't just embarrassing, he said. It was dehumanizing. He paused. There's a difference between being shamed and being stripped of who you are. His voice cracked. For the first time, he looked down, trying to gather himself. Then he continued, "I never gave permission to be filmed. I didn't consent to any of it. But Diddy recorded it, maybe to use against me. Maybe just to keep for himself." Will explained how for years, he couldn't understand the sudden waves of anxiety he'd feel whenever certain names came up, or why he'd have panic attacks during ordinary interviews. "Now I get it," he said. "I wasn't paranoid. I was remembering things I didn't want to remember." Hearing the tape, he said, forced him to face it all: the manipulation, the grooming, and worst of all, the people who stood by and watched. But what haunted him most, he told the court, wasn't what he heard on the tape, it was everything he couldn't remember. "If you want to know how deep Diddy's power runs," Will said to the jury, "ask yourself how someone like me could be silenced for decades without even realizing it." By the time news of Will's testimony hit social media, it was too late for PR teams to spin it. The courtroom clips were already everywhere, trending before the bailiff could even call order. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Will speaks. Hashtag Diddy files. Hashtag freakoff tape. For the first time, the public saw Will not as a flawless star, but as someone who had survived something unspeakable. "I knew speaking out would get ugly," Will said, "but I didn't think it would happen this fast." Within 24 hours of taking the stand, he said, 2 endorsement deals were pulled. A studio paused a marketing campaign for a film he'd already completed. But to Will, the damage was already done long ago. "I lost my voice years back," he said. "This is me getting it back." After his testimony, he said, the calls started coming in quiet, cautious ones. Some were messages of support from actors, producers, even directors. Others were warnings. "You don't know who you've just gone to war with," one read. Another said bluntly, "You've just made yourself toxic." Will didn't name names directly. He said he was limited by legal boundaries, but when the prosecution asked about people like Kevin Hart, Meek Mill, and Lucian Grange, he gave a subtle nod. "This isn't just about Diddy," he said. "This is about an entire system of silence, and everyone's been cashing in." He also acknowledged that he knew they might retaliate. "I'm sure there's more footage," he said. "Stuff they'll use to try and smear me, paint me as crazy, damaged, unstable. Let them. I'm not here to save myself. I'm here to tell the truth." He said he expected the blowback, expected denial, spin, character attacks, and he was sure Diddy's team would try to flip the narrative. "They'll say I'm bitter, that I'm hiding something. But I want you to ask yourself this. If I were lying, why wait until now when I've got more to lose than ever?" Will asked the court. Then he paused, steadying his breath, and ended that portion of his testimony with a line that left the room in absolute silence. "Sometimes the truth comes late, but when it does, it hits like thunder." The judge gave Will permission to make a final statement, and he used it to address Diddy directly. He stood up, walked a few steps forward, and looked straight at him. "You built an empire on manipulation," Will said, his voice clear and calm. "You called it success. You called it culture. You even called it love. But all you really built was fear." Diddy didn't move. He sat frozen, his lawyer whispering urgently into his ear. But Diddy said nothing. Will didn't flinch. "I saw what you did to those women. I saw what you did to me. I heard what you said when you thought I couldn't hear. You didn't build people, you broke them for fun." Then Will pulled a photo from his pocket. It was old, creased. "This is me, 2004. Right before that first party." He held it up for the courtroom to see. "That's the man I used to be. I haven't seen him in a long time." He turned to the jury. "If you think this is just about Cassie, or me, or one night in some mansion, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about a system, a network built to crush truth before it ever has a chance. And if we don't take it apart, piece by piece, it's going to keep happening." Finally, We'll turn back to Diddy. "You once said, nobody parties like Diddy." He paused, and then added coldly, "Well, nobody lies like you either." With that, he returned to the witness stand, gathered his things, and walked out of the courtroom. He never looked back. Diddy stayed in his seat, ashen-faced, silent, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time in decades, he was not the one commanding the room. When Will stepped off the stand, he didn't look like someone who'd won a fight. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. The courtroom remained still, tense, like it had forgotten how to exhale. Even the judge appeared shaken. Some jurors wiped away tears. And Diddy, he had no retort, no smirk, no swagger. For once, he had nothing to say. Will didn't speak to the press as he exited. No waves. No statements. Just a long, steady walk out the courthouse doors, his head held high, though his shoulders bore the weight of 2 decades of silence. When asked by a reporter later if he felt any relief, he reportedly gave a quiet reply, "Over." That's how it ended, not with a verdict, not with applause, but with a quiet, undeniable shift. The courtroom emptied slowly, like the air itself had thickened with consequence. For years, stories like Will's had lived in the margins, whispered in green rooms, smoothed over with NDA letters and handshakes. But now, one of Hollywood's most polished icons had stepped forward and shattered the illusion. Outside, a crowd had gathered, not screaming, not protesting, just standing, holding signs, holding space. Some carried photos of loved ones. Others wore shirts with one word in block: print. Believed. The entertainment industry scrambled to contain the fallout. Legal departments requested audits. HR departments launched internal reviews. Celebrities who had once posted birthday tributes to Diddy were now scrubbing timelines, quietly rewriting history. But there was no going back. Will's quiet defiance had done more than make headlines. It had forced the industry to look in the mirror. And it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about all the rooms, all the silences, all the careers buried beneath the weight of powerful men and the systems that protected them. As one journalist wrote the next day in an op-ed that quickly went viral, this wasn't just Will Smith reclaiming his voice. This was the sound of an industry waking up, finally listening to the echoes it spent decades ignoring. And though no one knew what the final outcome of the trial would be, one truth had already taken root: silence is no longer the currency. Truth is.